Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to strap in and travel back 5 centuries right into a really high-stakes moment in military history. It's often called the Schlacht der Riesen, the Battle of the Giants. And this deep dive is all about understanding this brutal 2-day clash in September 1515. Some later historians even gave it a pretty dramatic title.
Genosis Stalingrad. A bit over the top, maybe, but it shows the impact.
Definitely shows the impact.
We're digging into the Battle of Marignano, or Melignano as it's also known. A really vicious fight for control over the Duchy of Milan, which was incredibly wealthy, and basically northern Italy itself.
Yeah, and this wasn't just, another skirmish in the endless Italian wars. This was different.
Now, completely different. This event basically reset the whole balance of power in Renaissance Europe.
The stakes just couldn't have been higher. You had the rising French kingdom led by this charismatic young King Francis II.
I'm backed by the Venetians, don't forget.
Right, backed by Venice. And on the other side, the military machine that, all of Europe feared at the time, the old Swiss Confederacy, masters of the Pike Square. They seemed invincible.
They really did. So the core question for us, the thing we really need to unpack, is what exactly happened? What happened when those disciplined, relentless Swiss Pike formations, which had dominated battlefields for, over a century?
Yeah, easily.
What happened when they finally smashed up against this new combination? French heavy cavalry, the elite gendarmes, and crucially, the most advanced artillery park anyone had seen in Europe up to that point.
Marignano. It really was where the old ways of war met the future.
And the result was, profound and bloody.
Okay, so to really get the scale of the shock, the collapse that followed Marignano, we first need to understand just how dominant the Swiss were before the battle.
Right.
Leading up to 1515, the old Swiss Confederacy wasn't this, quiet, neutral mountain state we think of today. Far from it.
Absolutely not. They were arguably the dominant military superpower in Europe, maybe temporarily, but still dominant.
How did that happen? Mercenaries, right?
Entirely. At the turn of the 16th century, the Swiss held this crucial strategic role in all the complex Italian power games, purely because of their mercenary forces, world-renowned.
The Reichsläuferei.
Exactly, the Reichsläuferei. It was basically an economic engine for the cantons, which were often quite poor in resources. The quality of their infantry meant they could demand huge contracts, sometimes just their name. The threat of Swiss involvement was enough to settle things.
Wow. And the big prize everyone was fighting over was the Duchy of Milan. Why Milan specifically? What made it so valuable apart from just being rich?
Well, Milan was the gateway to Italy for any power coming from the north. Simple as that. Whoever held the duchy controlled the incredibly fertile Lombard plains, key trade routes. It was strategic gold.
And the French wanted it badly.
Oh, yes. The French crown, first under Louis XII and then Francis the Rest, they had these inherited claims through a Milanese princess, Valentina Visconti. So for them, controlling Milan meant controlling northern Italy. And from there, you could exert huge influence over the Pope, the Papal States, everything south.
Got it. And at first, the French actually used Swiss help to get Milan, didn't they, back in 1498?
They did, hire them. But, the mercenary system was always volatile. Allegiances, they shifted, depended on who made the better offer.
So things changed.
Dramatically. By 1512, the situation completely flipped.
Why the flip?
Primarily down to the political maneuvering of Pope Julius II. He was absolutely determined to stop French expansion in Italy. He put together the Holy League, and crucially, he persuaded the Swiss to switch sides, to ditch the French.
And they did.
They did. In 1512, about 18,000 Swiss soldiers marched south in what's known as the Grossen Pavierzug. They kicked the French out of Milan and installed Maximilian Sforza, the son of the previous duke, as the new ruler.
Wow. So the Swiss weren't just soldiers for hire anymore. They were kingmakers.
That was the absolute peak of their power in the region. They were dictating who sat on thrones.
And presumably getting paid very well for it.
Enormously well. Milan basically became a Swiss protectorate. The agreements were incredible. Trade privileges, sure, but also annual payments of 40,000 ducats. Huge money.
Thin territory, too.
Critically, yes. They secured strategic control over key areas south of the Alps, the Ennetbergische Vogteien. Essentially, this meant they controlled every major Alpine pass from the Stilfserjoch way over in the east to the Great St. Bernhard in the west.
So complete logistical control. No army gets in or out of Italy without their say-so.
Exactly. Unless you were prepared to fight your way through Swiss territory, they had total dominance.
And they back this up on the battlefield. Novara, 1513.
Novara. A brilliant, brutal confirmation of their supremacy. Just 2 years before Marignano, they smashed a combined French and Venetian army. It cemented their reputation. The Swiss infantry phalanxes weren't just good. They were seen as the best infantry in Europe, period. Unstoppable, it seemed, in an age dominated by shock infantry.
Seems like nothing could stop them. Was there anyone driving this politically?
Oh, absolutely. You can't talk about this era without mentioning Cardinal Matthias Scheiner, the papal legate, Bishop of Sion. He wasn't just some quiet churchman.
No.
Not at all. He was ambitious, a master strategist, really. He used religious feeling, papal authority to align the Confederacy firmly against France. He was the one who brokered that key military pact with Pope Julius back in 1510.
Okay.
And when the Swiss threw the French out in 1512, it was Scheiner who personally presented them with these 42 ceremonial banners, the famous Julius banner.
Julius banner.
Yeah, framing the whole campaign as this righteous, holy war against the French king. Scheiner genuinely saw the Swiss as God's hammer, and he was determined to swing that hammer against France.
Right, so the stage is set, Swiss dominance, Scheiner pushing them on, but then comes the change in France. Louis XII dies.
And in steps Francis I, young, dynamic, ambitious, just 20 years old when he takes the throne.
And he immediately targets Milan again. But he seems to understand something crucial about the Swiss. It wasn't just about their pikes.
Exactly. That's the key insight Francis had. He knew that fighting the unified Swiss head-on was incredibly risky, a massive gamble. So what did he do first?
Diplomacy.
Money, lots of it.
Mm-hmm.
He tried to use diplomacy as a weapon, specifically to break their internal cohesion. Before risking a single French life, he tried to buy them off. And the offer was, well, astronomical, even for the Renaissance.
How much are we talking?
1 million crowns. Total.
1 million. How did that break down?
Okay, so he offered the 400,000 crowns that were promised but never ratified in the old Treaty of Dijon, plus another 300,000 for their campaign costs, and another 300,000 if they cleared out of the Milanese areas they were occupying.
Wow. A guaranteed 1 million crowns, just to step aside.
A phenomenal sum. And you have to ask, why turn that down? Was it just Scheiner being stubborn? Or did the Swiss really believe their military reputation, their influence, was worth more than 1 million gold crowns guaranteed?
It sounds like a mix. Scheiner's hardline anti-French position, backed by the Pope's money, definitely played a huge part. He managed to convince the inner cantons, the more traditional, rural, war-hardened ones.
The core of their military strength.
Right. He convinced them that taking the money was weak, dishonorable. They genuinely believed their track record meant Francis was bluffing or that he couldn't possibly dislodge them. Pride was a huge factor.
Their pride was literally wrapped up in their pikes.
So despite this king's ransom being offered, the Swiss leadership, swayed by Scheiner and the Warhawks, just said no, emphatically rejected the deal.
Which meant war was inevitable.
Yeah. And in spring 1515, Francis I didn't just send an army, he sent a statement. An army designed to completely overwhelm everyone.
The scale was unprecedented for the time. Around 55,000 men in total, infantry, his elite gendarmes cavalry, and that incredibly powerful artillery train.
And the initial Swiss force sent to protect Milan.
Barely 18,000. The numbers were against them from the start.
But Francis didn't stop there, did he? He kept pushing the diplomatic angle, trying to split them, even as his army marched.
He did. He knew the internal divisions were his best weapon. He exploited the existing tensions. The urban cantons, like Bern, were more pragmatic. They saw the 1 million crown as a pretty good deal.
Sense of payoff, yeah.
While the rural inner cantons were more ideological, loyal to Scheiner's vision. Francis played on this perfectly.
And it worked.
It culminated in the Treaty of Gallerat, signed September 8th, 1515, just days before the battle. Francis basically agreed to the huge payment again, recognized some Swiss land gains on the condition they abandoned Sforza and Milan.
So some of the Swiss took the deal.
They did. This created a massive fracture. About 10,000 Swiss mercenaries, specifically the troops from Bern, Solothurn, Freiburg, Bielbienne, and the Valais, they accepted the terms and just marched home.
10,000 men just left.
Walked away. These were the more politically aware cantons, maybe, prioritizing the money, the economic security, over fighting Scheiner's war.
That must have been devastating for the ones who stayed.
Catastrophic. They were left with roughly 22,000 troops. Still a formidable force, sure, but now facing a combined Franco-Venetian army nearly 3 times their size.
And how did they feel? The ones left behind.
Betrayed,
Yeah.
humiliated, angry. They were heavily influenced by Scheiner, still there with them, and Duke Maximilian Sforza. They felt their honor was on the line. They were absolutely spoiling for a fight.
So they were motivated, even if outnumbered. What finally kicked things off?
The immediate trigger, The spark was actually a relatively minor skirmish. Happened just outside Milan on September 13th. The remaining Swiss, fired up, probably egged on by Scheiner himself.
You can imagine him urging them on.
Oh, absolutely. They felt they couldn't wait. They couldn't let the French consolidate. They decided to attack, seize the initiative. They still believed that the shock of their charge, their discipline, would break the French.
Okay, so this sets up a truly ferocious collision, the Battle of the Giants, and it starts late in the day.
Yeah, unusually late. Around 3 p.m. on September 13th, 1515, near Marignano, just south of Milan. The timing is interesting because it meant darkness would cut the fighting short.
Which might have actually helped the Swiss initially. Less time under French cannon fire.
Arguably, yes. It limited the effectiveness of that artillery park, at least on day one.
So paint the picture for us. What did the Swiss attack look like? 20,000 men.
Imagine it. 20,000 Swiss soldiers, organized into those terrifyingly disciplined Gewalthaufen, these huge battle groups.
What exactly was a Gewalthaufen? Why was it so feared?
Okay, picture a dense infantry phalanx, maybe 30, 40 ranks deep, just bristling with these long pikes up to 18 feet long, a moving fortress of wood and steel.
Like an iron hedgehog.
Pretty much. They relied on sheer mass, momentum, and cohesion. Once a Gewalthaufen started moving, it was almost impossible to stop head-on. And at Marignano, they came on in 3 main groups. The inner cantons took the center, Zurich was on the right wing, and Lucerne and Basel formed the left.
And they just charged straight into the French camp.
Straight in. Relentless discipline, just aiming to punch right through.
But the French were expecting them, and they had the numbers and the tech.
They were ready, and the numbers were daunting.
Yeah.
On the Franco-Venetian side, you had about 16,000 French troops, maybe 17,000 German Landsknechts.
The Landsknechts, they were rivals to the Swiss, weren't they? Pike infantry, too.
Exactly, including the famous Black Guard led by Asch von Kram. Fierce fighters. Plus, and this is key, 12,000 French heavy cavalry, the gendarmes.
And the artillery. That's the game changer here.
The absolute game changer. This wasn't just a few cannons. Francis had an unprecedented artillery park. We're talking 74 heavy bronze field guns.
Mm-hmm.
These could punch holes in anything, plus over 300 light artillery pieces.
Bronze, not iron. That made a difference.
Huge difference. Bronze cannons were more reliable, could sustain a higher rate of fire, and were generally more powerful than the older iron ones. These weren't slow siege guns. They were battlefield weapons designed for rapid, devastating fire.
And the Swiss artillery.
They managed to bring maybe 6 light cannons to the fight. That's it. The disparity was just stark.
So the clash must have been incredible. The sound alone.
Unimaginable. The roar of those heavy cannons, the constant drumming of the Swiss war drums, the screens, the clash of steel. It was raw, ferocious. And despite that cannonade, the Swiss still managed to push deep into the French lines.
They actually broke into the camp.
They did. The initial shock of their charge was so powerful it just swallowed the first French cavalry attacks. Francis I's own camp was breached. Accounts describe total confusion, chaos. The fighting became incredibly close quarters.
Halberds and swords coming out.
Exactly. Halberds, the famous Swiss short swords. A brutal melee. And the Swiss held their ground for hours, even with a nonstop shelling, smoke, dust everywhere. Apparently Francis III himself was right in the thick of it.
The king himself fighting.
Yeah, personally leading countercharges with his gendarmes, trying to stabilize the line, defend his precious cannons. Adds to the drama, doesn't it?
Definitely. So day one wasn't a quick victory for either side. It was just a grind.
A brutal grinder. A massive slugfest deep inside the French camp that lasted right into the twilight hours.
Until darkness stopped it.
Until darkness finally fell. Both armies were just shattered, exhausted, bleeding, completely tangled up together on the battlefield. The fighting was incredibly fierce. But ultimately, day one ended, undecided. Only stopped because men couldn't physically fight in the pitch black.
And they just stayed there.
Both sides bivouacked right there, on a killing field, sleeping literally among the thousands of dead and wounded from the day's fighting.
God, the tension. Knowing dawn just meant more killing.
Exactly. An unbroken night on the battlefield. The stakes were still impossibly high. Everyone knew the slaughter would resume at sunrise.
So sunrise, September 14th, and the Swiss just go again.
True to their reputation, they renewed the assault at dawn, still trying to force the issue with that relentless momentum, determined to break the French this time.
But the French had survived the first shock, and Francis had time to adjust.
Well, this is where Francis's tactical skill, combined with his technological advantage, really starts to tell. The French lines had managed to consolidate overnight. They were better prepared for the second wave.
And the artillery, let's dig into that a bit more. How did those guns really change things against the Swiss squares?
It was devastatingly effective. See, the Gewaltwaffen relied entirely on its density. That tight formation was its strength, its cohesion.
Right.
But artillery loves dense formations. It's the perfect target. Every single cannonball, especially from those big bronze heavies, would just carve through rank after rank of men, carrying huge bloody gaps in the formation.
Unlike skirmishers who could just spread out.
Exactly. The Swiss had to stay packed tight to fight effectively with pikes. So when a cannonball rips a hole open, it's not just the men killed instantly, it's the disruption, the difficulty reforming ranks under constant fire, and the psychological impact.
Must have been horrific.
Facing that kind of impersonal, continuous bombardment, something they just hadn't experienced on this scale before, it must have shattered morale, made any kind of coordinated movement incredibly difficult.
And those gaps, the French cavalry could exploit them.
Instantly. Those French gendarmes, remember, these aren't just random knights. They're organized, heavily armored shock cavalry. They would charge right into those breaches the cannons created, delivering these shattering blows.
Which the Swiss couldn't counter easily in the chaos.
Not effectively. Pikes need space in order to work properly against cavalry. In those broken, messy conditions, the gendarmes could get in close and do terrible damage. It was this combined arms approach artillery creating openings, cavalry exploiting them, that the Swiss just had no answer for.
Still, it sounds like the Swiss were holding on. It was still a deadlock.
It was a grinding, brutal deadlock. France's the First Army was holding, but only just. The Swiss were still pushing incredibly hard. Then, around mid-morning, about 10 a.m., the decisive moment arrived.
Reinforcements.
The sound of reinforcements. It broke the tension. It was the Venetian light cavalry.
Ah, Delviano's troops.
Led by the veteran Condottiere Bartolomeo Delviano, yes. They finally arrived on the battlefield. They charged straight into the fight, shouting the Venetian battle cry, San Marco!
How many men did they bring?
Estimates vary, maybe 3,000 to 5,000 fresh troops. But their arrival was the critical turning point. It tipped the balance. It allowed the French to finally start overwhelming the exhausted Swiss flanks.
So the Venetian arrival just changed the whole equation. The Swiss had been fighting the main French army, the gendarmes, the artillery, for almost 18 hours straight by this point.
Exactly. And the light cavalry specifically started harassing the Swiss on the edges, preventing them from maneuvering or reforming properly. It just added another layer of pressure they couldn't handle.
The grind just became unbearable.
Absolutely. So the French victory, in the end, wasn't just about the final numbers, though they helped. It was about the seamless execution of combined arms warfare. And, you have to say, Francis I's political skill in dividing the Swiss beforehand was crucial.
That combination proved lethal. Artillery suppressing, cavalry breaking.
It was the formula. And it spelled the end for the unchallenged supremacy of pike infantry.
And the cost. The giant's toll, as they called it, must have been immense.
Horrific. Just horrific. Contemporary accounts, they often tried to downplay casualties. Maybe 3,000 French dead, 6,000 Swiss. Sounds bad enough.
But probably not accurate.
No. Later historians, looking at the sheer intensity and density of the fighting over 2 days, they estimate much higher numbers. We're likely talking 5,000 to 8,000 killed on the French side.
So huge losses for the victors, too.
Massive losses, but for the Swiss, catastrophic. Probably 9,000 to 10,000 Swiss mercenaries killed.
10,000 out of maybe 22,000 who started?
Yeah, almost half their force wiped out. In total, maybe up to 15,000 dead across the 2 days. Just a staggering butcher's bill for that era.
Unbelievable. So by midday on the 14th, it was over.
The pressure was just too much. The firepower, the exhaustion, the numbers, it forced the inevitable. The Swiss, famous for their refusal to retreat, simply had no choice left. The surviving units began to withdraw, pulling back towards Milan, carrying their wounded, trying to save their banners, and hauling the few light cannons they still had. So Marignano, utterly catastrophic for the Swiss Confederacy. The consequences just spread like ripples across Europe. It really marked the end of their time as an expansionist military power.
But let's start with the immediate aftermath, that retreat. There's this sort of romantic myth about it, isn't there? The orderly Swiss withdrawal.
Right, the image of these stoic soldiers marching off in perfect formation. Defeated, yes, but unbroken, disciplined to the last.
But that's not quite how it happened.
Not according to contemporary accounts or later analysis. The reality seems much grittier. Sources suggest the initial withdrawal was actually closer to a panicked flight. Disorganized, chaotic, even though the Duke of Milan technically ordered a retreat.
So chaos. How did they regain control?
Well, this is one of the most fascinating details of the battle. Order was only restored, or at least some semblance of order, because the French troops stepped in.
The French, the winners.
In an incredible act of maybe tactical respect, or perhaps just pragmatism. The French provided an escort for the retreating Swiss.
Why would they do that?
To protect them from the pursuing Venetian light cavalry. The Venetians wanted to harry them, maybe wipe them out completely. The French escort basically prevented a total annihilation of the survivors.
Wow, the victors protecting the vanquished from their own allies. That's extraordinary.
It is. But even with that French protection, it wasn't easy. Scattered Swiss soldiers, ones who couldn't keep up or got separated, were apparently attacked and robbed by local Lombard peasants. They saw these retreating soldiers as easy pickings. So yeah, the retreat was messy, dangerous, and deeply demoralizing.
And politically, back in Switzerland, did they want to keep fighting?
The immediate reaction was divided. The hardline, traditionalist cantons, Siener's allies, they actually demanded the Tagsatzung, the Swiss Diet, their assembly send another 22,000 troops immediately to continue the war.
22,000 more after those losses.
Incredible, isn't it? But sanity, or perhaps pragmatism, prevailed. The urban cantons pushed back. In the end, only a few minimal reinforcements were sent, and even they were quickly recalled. The will to fight on just wasn't there across the Confederacy.
So Milan fell.
Swiftly. Francis Kennedy entered Milan on October 4th, barely 3 weeks after the battle. And that was the end for Duke Maximilian Sforza, the man the Swiss had put on the throne.
What happened to him?
He formally abdicated. In return, Francis gave him a very comfortable French pension, 30,000 ducats a year. Not a bad deal, considering.
And Francis then locked down his victory diplomatically.
Absolutely. He followed up the military win with the defining political settlement, the Ivi Rictum, the Eternal Peace, signed November 29, 1516, between France and the Swiss Confederacy.
Eternal peace. What did that actually mean?
Its significance is huge. It formally ended the hostilities. It confirmed French control over Milan. It set up ways to arbitrate future disputes. The Swiss did get to keep some key Italian territories, like Bellinzona, but they gave up all claims to Milan itself.
And money changed hands again.
Oh, yes. Francis paid the 13 cantons a hefty 700,000 crowns as war compensation, essentially buying their future neutrality regarding Milan and securing their military loyalty.
Which brings us to the big military takeaway, the structural impact.
Marignano proved it definitively. Pike infantry on its own was no longer the queen of the battlefield. It couldn't win wars by itself anymore.
Not against combined arms.
Not against the devastating effectiveness of well-coordinated heavy cavalry and especially modern artillery. That combination could break even the most disciplined infantry square. It was a massive tactical and technological shift. The end of an era for the foot soldier, in a way.
And for Switzerland itself, what was the long-term impact?
It marked the permanent end of Swiss expansionism. They stopped being an independent great power shaping European politics through military force. Their role fundamentally shifted.
How so?
Well, subsequent treaties, like the one in 1521, essentially put the Swiss military firmly in French service. France gained the right to recruit up to 16,000 Swiss mercenaries annually in return for regular payments and trade deals. The Confederacy went from being a power broker to being essentially the highly paid elite security force for the French monarchy.
It's interesting how that defeat was later reframed, though.
Yeah, the 19th century, Swiss historians started looking back at Marignano differently. Not just as a disaster, but as the origin point of modern Swiss neutrality.
Gesclade Salus.
Out of defeat, salvation. That inscription says it all. The idea was that the military failure forced Switzerland to turn inward, to adopt political neutrality as a survival strategy, a kind of national soul-searching prompted by the defeat.
Fascinating reinterpretation. And there's one more ripple effect, isn't there? Something quite unexpected.
A huge one. The connection to the Protestant Reformation.
Through Zwingli.
Zwingli, the future reformer of Zurich. He was actually at Marignano. As a chaplain with the troops from Glarus, he saw the whole thing firsthand.
He witnessed the carnage, the giant's toll.
He saw it all. Countrymen being slaughtered, not just in fair fights, but by indiscriminate cannon fire. He saw the political infighting, the moral questions around the whole mercenary system. The experience utterly transformed him.
How did it change him?
The sheer horror, the moral contradictions of fighting for foreign kings for gold. It seems to have profoundly disturbed him. Soon after, he started preaching powerful, fiery sermons against the mercenary system, the Reichsläuferei.
And against Cardinal Scheiner.
Specifically against Scheiner, yeah. He saw him as one of the main architects of the disaster, one of the warmongers. Zwingli started referring to him dismissively as one of the Red Hats, that deep moral revulsion Zwingli felt at Marignano, the questioning of authority and tradition it sparked in him. It directly fueled his drive for reform. It was a key step on the road to the Reformation starting in Zurich just a few years later.
Wow. A military defeat helping to birth a spiritual revolution. Incredible connection. #outro.
So, summing up, Marignano was undeniably a massive victory for Francis I. It cemented his reputation, made him a legendary Renaissance king almost overnight, and secured French dominance in northern Italy for quite some time.
But for the Swiss, it remains arguably the single most significant event in their entire military history, both for the terrible human cost and for the profound, lasting political and strategic changes it forced upon them.
Yeah, the Battle of the Giants. It really was this potent mix of glory and tragedy. It wasn't just two armies clashing. It felt like a clash of eras. Old military traditions, the sheer human endurance of the Pike Square.
Meeting the brutal, impersonal efficiency of early modern technology. Artillery, combined arms.
Exactly. The Swiss, famous for their cohesion, their discipline, their refusal to break, they finally broke because the tactical game had changed. Their core strength was rendered almost obsolete by this new way of war.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If the Swiss hadn't been divided by Francis's diplomacy, by that huge bribe offer, could they have won? Could sheer manpower and morale have overcome the cannons and cavalry?
Or was it inevitable? Was the combined arms approach just too powerful? Was the era of the Pike Square ending anyway, and Marignano was just the first brutal demonstration?
It's a stark reminder, I think. Marignano shows how just one moment of tactical vulnerability, maybe worsened by internal divisions, maybe amplified by new technology, can completely change a nation's path, redefine its entire role in the world.
It's a powerful lesson, and maybe a thought for you, the listener, to take away. Think about other moments in history, seemingly decisive military victories, or even maybe technological breakthroughs today. How many of them were actually just masking a bigger underlying shift, a tide turning that hadn't fully played out yet? That moment where an unstoppable force suddenly meets something new that just changes all the rules.